Hello and welcome back to Christie's Cozy Corner. And it's that time of the month again. Oh wait, that sounds weird. It is now the end of July, which means it is time for my July reading wrap up. All the things that I read or tried to read in the month of July. And of course I have to mention how fast July just flew right by and how it's already the month of August and there's only so many months left in the year and it's gonna be 2024 soon. My brain cannot compute that. So in the month of July, I completed 6 books. So not quite as many as I had the previous months and definitely not as many as I wanted to get to. But towards the second half of the month, I did get quite busy with work. So there was a lot of other things going on. So unfortunately, I didn't get to read as much as I want to. So I completed 6 things and I also DNF'd 1. So as usual, we're going to go in the order of most speculative to least speculative, except in this case, everything I read was kind of all speculative, but we're just going to go from most to least. So the first book I'm going to talk about that I read in the month of July is Shadows of Self by Brandon Sanderson, which is the second book in the Mistborn Era 2 and 5th book overall in the Mistborn universe. And oh my god, I loved this book so much. So this is set in the Era 2 of the Mistborn universe, where it's 300 years after the events of the first era, and it follows a completely new set of characters, and you really see how the world has changed and evolved since then. And it's definitely not on as big of a scale as first era, so I can see why some people might not like it as much, but I still really enjoyed it because I still love this brand new cast of characters. Like, I think I pretty much like every single one of them. And it's just so cool to see how the magic has developed and seeing all these callbacks to the original trilogy and being like, oh hey, like I know what they're talking about here. But of course, that's not all this series has going on for it. Like at first, it just feels like a fun, rompy fantasy time where it doesn't take itself too seriously and there's not like a lot of really serious things going on. But as you progress more in the series, it just gets deeper and deeper and really doesn't feel like Sanderson was just like, I'm not gonna work too hard on this one, it's just gonna be whatever. Because there are some insane plot points that are happening, and when I got to the end of it, I was just completely mind blown. So there's a lot of really great things that are happening in this series, and for anyone who is still hesitant about picking up Second Era because you heard that it hasn't been as good, I implore you to pick it up because those people don't know what they're talking about. I'm kidding, obviously, to each their own. But yeah, so far I am really loving Era 2. I gave the second book a 5 stars, which I never would have expected because it was just that damn good. And of course, the characters as well. My favorite character is definitely Morrissey. Not sure if that's how you pronounce her name because I read this physically. She's just so cute and adorable. Like, she is this young woman who blushes very easily and is kind of very sheltered, but she does a lot of research and you can see how she really wants to make an impact on this world and make changes for the better for things that are not working out in society as they should be. And Wayne is just so freaking dumb, but like in the funniest way possible, and I love him. Every scene with Wayne is just such a delight, and he's definitely going to work differently for some people than others. It's like if you like Sanderson humor, Wayne is like peak Sanderson humor, and I am all here for it. And I even like Wax too, which I didn't expect. Like I thought he was just gonna be kind of okay for me because he is like this typical male action protagonist that can almost be like a self-insert, but there are actually a lot more layers to Wax than it seems, and he has really grown on me. And of course, Steris is also great as well, and I can't wait to read more about her. So yeah, overall, really enjoying Era 2 so far, and I've also started The Bands of Mourning, so hoping to complete that in the month of August. The next book that I'll talk about is The Malevolent 7 by Sebastian de Castell, and this is Sebastian de Castell's latest novel that released in May of this year, and it's about these mages, or wonderists as they're called in this world, who are really typically known as the bad guys. Like, they know that they're the bad guys, and even the kind of magic that they do is kind of like the bad guy magic. And it follows our main character, Cade, and his friend Corrigan, who are basically mercenaries for hire for this really bad dude who pretends like he's doing things because this is what the higher power wants, but really it's for all his own personal gain, and he sucks. So Cade and Corrigan just do whatever he tells them to do, which includes invading other people's land and killing a lot of innocent people along the way just because they're collateral damage. So yeah, they're not good guys at all. But this book is about what happens when the fate of the world depends on these people to save them because they're the only ones who can. So it has some interesting exploration into human nature and introduces the idea of who can you really consider are the good guys versus the bad guys. So I enjoyed this book for the most part. It was definitely a very quick and fun and entertaining kind of read. I think my only issue with it is that I just didn't connect to the characters as much as I wanted to. But the world and magic were definitely really interesting and what really intrigued me about this book. And originally it was supposed to be a standalone, but the ending was kind of open and I really felt like there was so much more that could be explored with all of these elements that Sebastian de Castell put together and everything that he has built. And it actually turns out that it's going to end up being a trilogy now, which is really exciting because I really wanted to see more in this world and just see what happens beyond the ending. So overall, I gave this book a 3.5 stars. Like I said, I didn't love it as much as I wanted to, so it didn't quite hit that 4-star level, but it was still really, really fun and entertaining, and I had a great time reading it. And there is one character that I did really, really love, and I hope to see more of them in the next book. And the next book that I'll talk about is Harrow the Ninth by Tamsin Muir, the second book in the Locked Tomb series right after Gideon the Ninth. And oh my God, this book was incredible. After reading this book, this has really cemented the Locked Tomb as one of my favorite series of all time. It's just so amazing and feel like it was just written specifically for me because of all the things that it does and the kind of characters that it has. So as everybody says, and it's very true, Harrow the Ninth starts off extremely confusing and just kind of throws you into the middle of the situation that really doesn't explain all that much and you're not familiar with at all because it is so different from the first book. And it also has these elements that really play with your memory. Like it will reference some things that happened in the first book, but you're like, wait, that's not how things happened in the first book at all. So it really melts your brain with how much this book basically gaslights you into thinking the way you remember things weren't the way that they actually happened. So it is so wild. But I do think you can start to piece things together as you go along. You don't have to wait all the way until the ending for everything to make sense because there are a lot of hints and clues sprinkled throughout the way, which I think makes this series a really good one to reread because you can see all the crumbs that have been laid out in the past that you might not necessarily have picked up on the first read, but then on the second read, you're like, oh my God, like that was there the entire time. So it was so much fun, especially when the theories that I had in mind turned out to be true by the end. So it's like, I just feel so smart and accomplished. And of course, I gave this 5 stars because it was just so dang amazing. And also I should mention that I read this book for the 5-star treasure hunt readathon that Jessie from Jessie May created as a readathon for her patrons for the month of July. Most of the books I read in this month were for that readathon. So this one was definitely a success because it was a 5 stars. I also read the Malevolent 7 for this readathon as well. So because I gave it a 3.5 stars, that one didn't quite hit the mark. But Harrow definitely did. And for anyone who is nervous about going into Harrow, definitely understandable. I do think it's best to experience this, like just knowing that you're going to be confused and just being okay with it. Like just go along for the ride and not think too hard about it, but then once things start to come together, then you can start like puzzling things out. I also think it's worth it not to take too much time between reading Gideon and reading Harrow because it references a lot of things that happened in the first book that you should be familiar with the first book and not forget everything that happened in the first book, or else you're going to be even more confused in Harrow. And one more thing I'll say about this book is that it introduces a new set of characters who I absolutely adore. Their relationship with one another is so messy and complex, but so much fun. And I just had a blast every time they interacted. And the next book was actually a DNF. And that is The Serpent and the Wings of Night by Carissa Broadbent. Oh, I really wanted to like this book, okay? Like, I have been on the hunt for a romantasy that I can really, really be invested in and love just as much as everybody else. And this one seemed really promising. Like, this one had the highest ratings, and I've heard nothing but the highest of praises from a lot of people. Even people who don't normally read romantasies seem to really like this book. And this one does seem like it's been the most highly rated and highly hyped romantasy. After Fourth Wing, of course, which we all know did not work for me. But I really had my sights set on this one, and it started off okay. Like, it read fast and compelling enough to get me into the story quickly. But the more I kept going, the more I kept wondering, like, when is this supposed to get good? So this book is about the main character, who I already cannot remember the name of. Oh my god, what is her name? Oriah. Her name was Oriah. Okay, so our main character, Oriah, who is a human girl who, when she was around 8 years old, her entire family was killed in this attack. And she was saved by the vampire king. And in this world, it's like ruled by the vampires, and there's 3 different kinds of vampires, and they're all kind of rivals and were previously at war with one another, but right now there's like a really uneasy kind of peace that's happening. So the main character gets saved by the vampire king, who is part of the clan that is the overall ruler right now. And she's basically adopted by him as like his adoptive daughter, but obviously because she's human, there's a lot of prejudice and a lot of danger against her. And in this world, it's also very risky to turn someone from human to a vampire. Like 2 of the 3 times they end up dying, it only works 1/3 of the time. So the option to turn her into a vampire is obviously out because he doesn't want to risk her dying. So their plan is for her to enter this trial that happens every 100 or so years, that's basically run by their goddess Neaxia, and it's supposed to be like the blood spilled in this tournament feeds her. And there's like 50 or so other vampires who compete in this because whoever comes out as the winner gets 1 wish from the goddess herself. And Oriah's wish would be to have this kind of magical bond that ties her with her and Vincent, the vampire king, that allows her to share his power. So she'll get like all the powers of the vampire without actually being one, which obviously doesn't make any sense because you would rather risk a 1 in 50 chance over a 1 in 3 chance. Like, make that make sense, especially because she is human and it doesn't matter that she's been training for this for like half her life. The other people are literally vampires with supernatural abilities. It just doesn't make any sense and required so much suspension of disbelief. Sorry, I don't want to go into like a whole another rant session because I just recently had a rant video and I feel like I've already been negative enough. So yeah, this book really didn't work for me because I did not like any of the characters. There is one character that I liked. I liked Misha, which is one of the vampires that she meets and kind of allies with in the tournament, but it really just felt like Misha was used as a plot device to get her and the main love interest closer together, and as soon as she was done her part, she was gone. And also the main love interest. Okay, one thing about the main love interest is that I do appreciate that he wasn't just like the typical douchey alpha male kind of love interest that you see in a lot of the other romantasies. Like, he seemed kind of fun and goofy and nice, which was really nice to see. But at the same time, he and Oriah had like 0 chemistry. And by the time I got to the halfway mark, I already knew that I wasn't really enjoying this book and I wouldn't give it more than a 2 stars. So at that point, I was just reading it just to finish it and also admittedly just to get to the spicy scene. So I ended up DNFing this at 71%. Before we even got a spicy scene. Like, obviously I wasn't reading this book just for the spice, but because I wasn't enjoying anything else about it, I'm like, okay, maybe this one thing would be its saving grace. But I just couldn't go on any further, so I didn't end up getting to it anyway. But yeah, I DNF'd it at 71%, and I would have kept going, but I'm like, you know, the whole reason that I picked this book up, and I don't think I would have picked this book up otherwise, but the whole reason that I did was because it was for this 5-star treasure hunt readathon, and it was for the prompt to read something out of your comfort zone. And romantasies are definitely out of my comfort zone because I have not read a single one that I really, really liked. So I really wanted to find one that I liked, but obviously this one I didn't like, so it defeated the whole purpose of why I picked it up in the first place. And I didn't want to waste any more time on this one knowing that I just didn't like it. So yeah, I DNF'd it, but if I had to rate it, I would have given it a 2 stars. Now on the opposite side, I also picked up the Sword of Kaigen for this readathon, and The hype for this one is real. I gave this a full 5 stars. It was so incredible and just everything that everyone said it would be. This book takes place in a world that is very Earth-like and has a lot of similar elements to Earth, but just with some magic. And it takes place on an island called Shirojima, which is part of the greater empire of Kekon. And Shirojima is kind of essentially like our world's version of Japan. And did I say Keikon or Kaigen? Did I say Keikon? That's from the Greenbone Saga. I meant Kaigen. And the people who live on Shirojima are part of these really old warrior families that from generation to generation, it's been passed down that it is their duty to defend the empire from their enemies, the Ronganese. So because of that, this region is known as the Sword of Kaigen. And we follow 2 main perspectives. The first is Misaki, who married into one of these warrior families. And this is a very patriarchal society. So only the men are seen as the warriors and the women are supposed to be very demure, and their only role is to take care of the kids and pump out babies. And essentially that's what Misaki has been relegated to. But she has a past where she studied overseas and was kind of a warrior herself as well, but she's kind of had to hide that from her present life because it is very looked down upon for women to be fighters. The other perspective that we follow is her son Mamoru, who is this 14-year-old boy who's been trained in like this way of the warrior, and it has been ingrained in his mind that this is his whole reason for existing, is to be this warrior for the empire. And his story is about having this illusion shattered and discovering that the empire might not be as great as he was always told all his life. So we follow Misaki and Mamoru as they live their lives on this island, and everyone believes that this is a very peaceful time with no threat from any of the empire's enemies, at least according to what the empire has been telling everyone. But there seems to be a kind of disconnect with what they're being told versus what they are seeing from the outside world, and we follow the story from there. And this book is just as amazing as everyone says it is, and the author M.L. Wong just does such a great job conveying all of these emotions, and also just some really great character work in here as well, because there are some characters who you will absolutely hate, but there are so many more deeper layers to them that you don't get to see until later, and it really shows you why they are the way they are. And I just think that she is such a good writer for that. Like halfway through this book, there was not a single moment where even a single sentence would make me tear up. And then as soon as I think I have recovered from that, the next sentence all over again. And it's like the same kind of feeling that I got when I read Guns of the Dawn by Adrian Tchaikovsky, where everything is just filled with so much emotion. My emotions! But one thing that I'll say that bugged me a little about this book, but of course in no way detracted from the 5-star rating that I gave it, was that this island and the characters are very Japanese inspired, but M.L. Wong herself is half Asian but is not Japanese, and it really shows sometimes, because there have been some cases where the language is not really used in the right way. And one thing that bothers me is like when random Japanese words are just randomly sprinkled throughout, and it doesn't need to be. Like, it's not like they're switching between languages or anything, because most of it is in English. You could have just written it in English as well and it would have had the exact same kind of feeling. But because like some random Japanese is used, it's just kind of giving 14-year-old anime fan fiction, if you know what I mean. But I feel like this is only the kind of thing that would bother people if you grew up reading anime fan fiction like I did. And if you didn't, it probably wouldn't faze you at all. So that was just like a really minor personal thing that I had. There were also some things that happened towards the ending that introduced elements that could lead to a wider plot beyond just this one contained area, because M.L. Wong does have some other books that are part of the wider Theonite universe. So there were a lot of loose threads that were kind of left, but then it turns out that she actually discontinued her Theonite universe and she's not going to be writing in it anymore, at least for the time being. She might go back to it later when she's a more seasoned writer, because she started writing in this universe when she was young and it just didn't turn out the way that she had envisioned. So it almost doesn't really make any sense for these elements to be introduced in this book when they're not going to be explored any further. So that kind of just makes me sad, because I do feel like it took away a little bit from the ending by doing that. But overall, I don't want to linger on those parts too much. I'd really rather focus on the wider themes and message of this standalone book, which were just so strong and beautiful and powerful and just absolutely incredible. This book deserves all the hype that it gets, it is definitely a 5 stars. So believe all the praise and read this book if you haven't already picked it up. The next book that I read is The Jade Setter of Janloon by Fonda Lee, which is the prequel to the Greenbone saga and a novella. And oh my god, again, I just loved this so much because the Greenbone saga is one of my favorite series of all time. And I love the world that she has created and the culture of this world and the Greenbones. And I didn't realize how much I missed it until I read this prequel. This prequel follows a completely different set of characters, but the characters that we're familiar with and love so much from the main series also make some cameos, and it's so fun to see how they were before the start of the series. Like Hilo, he was just this little punk, and I love him so much. And yeah, that's basically all I have to say about this book. I just love this world and the culture so much, and it really makes me want to reread the Greenbone saga all over again now. And obviously, I gave it 5 stars. And now that brings us to the last book that I'll talk about for this wrap up, and that is Mickey 7 by Edward Ashton, which I gave 2 stars. So this is a sci-fi that is about the main character named Mickey, who is what is called an expendable. So in this book, humans are trying to travel to all these different kind of planets and terraform and basically like colonize these planets, right? But a lot of the things that they have to do when they get there, but also like when they're in the process of getting there, are very dangerous. And they can't just risk anybody to do these kinds of dangerous jobs. So our main character signed up for this job to do all of these tasks that are all given to the person called an expendable. So what happens is that they basically have all of his DNA stored, and every time he dies, they create another version of himself and download all his latest thoughts and memories into the new version. So currently, he is Mickey 7, so he is on the 7th version of himself, which means that he has already died 6 times, and the body that he is in now is no longer the body that he was in originally. So the story begins with the current Mickey, Mickey 7, basically being put in a position where he is left for dead, and the people that he are with don't want to risk it to rescue him, so they're like, oh, you know what, we're just gonna leave you down there, you're gonna die anyway, we'll just make a new Mickey 8. So that's what they do, they make a Mickey 8, but it turns out Mickey 7 is still alive, and he ends up finding his way back to the colony. So now there are 2 of him, which introduces a lot of complication because there really isn't supposed to be 2 of them at all, and now, like, what are they gonna do? So what I did like about this book is that it introduces a lot of interesting topics, like what is immortality and consciousness and what makes a person who they are. Like for humans, our cells are constantly dying and being reproduced, that within 7 years, basically all the cells that we currently have in our body are completely different than what we had 7 years before. So are we really the same person? Obviously, we would say that we are. But what happens when this process, instead of being done over 7 years, is all of a sudden done at the same time? Because that's what's happening to Mickey. And it's like the ship of Theseus, you know? Like, what's the difference between being replaced one at a time versus all at once, when in the end, you're still gonna get the same result? So those were the kind of conversations that I found really fascinating about this book. However, it only really talked about them on a very surface level, and it didn't get as deep into it as I wanted to. Instead, it focused a lot more on the comedy and the stupidity of the main character, because oh my god, both Mickey 7 and 8 were just like the dumbest main characters that you could think of. Like, you would think that they would be very cautious about people finding out that there's 2 of them and being very careful about both of them venturing out at the same time and people seeing them in 2 different places. But no, they do that anyway, and it's like they're asking to get caught because they're just so dumb and so not careful about it. And I also think this is one of those cases where the audiobook really brought down my enjoyment of it, because the way the narrator read the story just made everything sound so lighthearted and casual and made Mickey sound even dumber than he probably reads in the text. So really didn't enjoy this book because of how dumb he was, and because it also went in some directions where I'm just like, why would you do that? I really hoped that they wouldn't, but they did. And I talk about this in the video where I rant about all the things that I hate in books. So yeah, for this book, really interesting concept, terrible execution in my opinion. And there is going to be a movie that's coming out for this book next year, so it makes me really curious the kind of approach that they're going to do for the movie. And I think part of the negatives, at least for me, for this book is that it just tries too hard to be one of those funny sci-fis like Andy Weir. Like, you can tell that this is heavily inspired by how Andy Weir writes his book, which already didn't work for me, so it's not really surprising that I didn't like this one either. All right, so there we have it. Those were all of the 6 books plus 1 DNF that I read in the month of July. Let me know down in the comments if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them, especially Sword of Kaigen, and if you haven't read it, if you're going to pick it up now. So that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again in my next one. Bye!